Now, our next speaker was Cammie's top of the list. I didn't know Jade before this, and so when we had our first meeting, and I heard about how he was heavily involved in how the bank transformed the way it's just does engineering practices, that fascinates me because we see large corporate, right, banks, traditional institution as something that is slow moving. There's just like, how do we even change or begin to impact the culture of that? And so please welcome Jade Thomas, the engineering manager at BNZ.
Well, thank you very much, Prae. Thank you, everybody. Today, I'm going to talk about a bit of my experience at BNZ. Bit about me. I've been in software engineering for 25 years. And so this talk isn't about the whole 25 years. There's lots and lots of stories that I could talk about. This is about the last 4 years of me somewhat reluctantly becoming an engineering manager. I'd always been a software developer, and I always enjoyed software developing. And I was back at BNZ, and it was about 4 years ago. And my boss at the time, Luke, convinced me somewhat reluctantly to get into management. And I thought, I don't want to be a manager. Managers just go to meetings and talk rubbish all day long. And he was just like, oh, but you'll be so good at it, Jade. And I was just and so he kind of said, like, but you'll have some influence. And I was like, hey, I can tell people what to do. This will be awesome. So somewhat reluctantly went in there. I was kind of like repulsed by that word manager. But I started, and the month that I started, it was like a bad omen or something. It was something like someone had released a chaos monkey into the system. And databases were being shut down, cascading failures were happening everywhere. I was on one tech bridge. I remember being on one tech bridge with our transactional database going down. And next thing, our Oracle databases, where all the logs were going down, were generating so many errors that we brought that database down. So I was going from one event to another. And as soon as I had that title, everybody came rushing to me with problems. This is broken, Jade. You need to fix this. This is broken. And I was like, what the hell have I got myself into? I remember looking back at the first month, we had 91% availability. I was kind of embarrassed being an engineering manager of online channels with 1.9 and like a low 1.9. So I was kind of reflecting on that. How did we get ourselves into this scenario? So BNZ is an awesome place, and we were doing some awesome work, and we were in this positive feedback loop where the 2 years before that, we were hiring more engineers. They were creating more features, they were creating more usage in the mobile app, and that generated more sales. And so people were like, okay, cool, let's hire more engineers. So they kept on doing this positive feedback loop. And that was great. We had massive growth. And the apps were improved massively. And we had some awesome talent that was hired during that time and did some really, really good job. But we went from 120 people in digital in the online space to 320 people relatively quickly. Little did we know that a lot of that funding that was moved to hire those extra 200 people was moved away from the infrastructure teams and the delivery teams to the delivery teams. When new teams were onboarded, what did new teams do? They create new things, and they did a really good job with those new things. But what we found when we looked at our mobile stack, it had over 900 dependencies in it. And this is like Dynatrace, and it looks pretty chaotic. And some of those dependencies were like 12 deep. So we had layers on layers. So new teams were doing a really good job, and no discredit to them, they were awesome engineering their things, but they often called, they didn't kind of fully understand the old thing, so quite often they'd create the new thing that called the old thing, that then called the other old thing, that then called that. So we had these big chains cascading services behind the scenes. And what happens with that, when you have cascading services, you get cascading failures. And so all it needed was one of these 900 things to go down, and then everything was down. Cool, so that made me kind of think about what was chaos and what was order, and how did they relate. So I did a lot of research. This is going in my mind for quite a long time, and I started to look at different frameworks. So Cynefin framework, probably not saying that well, it's a Welsh word for habitat. Really good framework. Really good at identifying what kind of order your system is in, whether it's in a chaotic space, whether it's in a complex space, and how to act within those systems. So I found that kind of useful, but it didn't really explain everything to me. I think it was quite good for a consultant going to a place that was relatively new, but it was missing somewhat for me. Maybe I didn't understand it. So then, and it wasn't till a while later, because this problem was still going in my head. So how does chaos and order relate? And I stumbled over a book, and I'll probably have to read this from the slides, but like stumbled on like how Taoists believe that reality is essentially made up of chaos and order. Chaos is all those things that you don't understand. So we would say that chaos is all those things that exist outside of our perception. Order is all those things that you do understand, and all those places you go to produce the results you intend. The Taoist system is a circle enclosing two serpents. The black serpent is chaos, and the white serpent is order. And they're intertwined. And in the heart or the eye of the black chaos serpent is order. And in the eye of order is chaos. And then, so these two are interchangeable. And this is kind of recognizes that any system can go from chaos to order at any point. Now, order is really, really good. It makes you feel safe. And order is really good for predictability, safety, and all those good things. But it doesn't have opportunity. Where chaos, the unknown has opportunity. The unknown has excitement. The unknown has good things. So the Tao believe that the way to deal with this is to walk the line between chaos and order. 1 foot in each camp. Not to be too focused in order, because that can be mundane and boring. And also, and not too much chaos. Too much chaos is too much unpredictability. But you need to find balance between the two. So the analogy I kind of drew is like product development and developing a new feature is dealing with the unknown. And engineering is dealing with order and making the unknown known and quantifying that. So I thought that's cool. And the way is how you balance the two. So what was our way? So first, we wanted to create a culture of engineering. We had really good, back at that time, we had really good pockets of engineering, but we didn't have a ubiquitous culture. So we wanted to see how we could create that. Second point, industrialize our patterns. And the third point, continuously simplify. So for a culture of engineering, that we didn't have like very strong culture back then. So what we set up early days was this concept of the triad. And in every kind of important meeting and at every level, there should be representations of engineering, product, and people. Now, Ben's is a really good place to work, and people are the of everything we do. So we saw this as a really important to have people underpinning everything, and quite often they refereed when there was decisions between engineering and product, couldn't decide. But each one of these triads were equal partners in everything. So in the hierarchies we had, have I got the right slide? Yep. Hierarchies that we had at BNZ. So at the teams, there was engineering leads in every teams, product owners in every teams, and people leaders. At the domain, that's our kind of like business unit within technology, there was engineering managers, product managers, and capability managers. And at the top level of technology, there was head of engineering, head of each of the domains, and head of capability. So that was a way that we could kind of bring engineering to the table of every conversation. Also, some of the structures we introduced was dedicated platform teams. So online we had lots and lots of teams with all important missions doing lots of different important stuff. But everybody kind of owned all systems, which meant nobody owned the systems. So what we instilled was clear ownership in all the different areas, but also platform teams that would look after the important platforms to support a lot of the product teams doing a lot of the delivery. This is also backed up by a new engineering department that looked after all the important stuff like databases and documentation and the patterns we use for CI/CD and stuff. So this gave a good opportunity for these teams to just focus on the business problems and use good patterns. But culture's not just structure. You can have all the structure you want. Structure facilitates culture, but it's not culture. Culture to us is what you do and how you operate. And in the core of that is having a shared belief system. What I noticed, on early days, we created an engineering manifesto, and that was really good. And I think what was really good about that was the creation of that, getting everybody together to create that all together. But when I was doing it, my mentor at the time said, like, if you write your values on the wall, there's something about that. It's like they're dead straight away. So don't write this stuff on the wall. And I was kind of perplexed. And he goes, remember that other bank we were working at? And he goes, yeah, they had some amazing values. And as soon as they put them on the wall, everybody acted the complete opposite way. And I was just like, wow. And he goes, and then so I kind of drew the analogy of like, it's kind of like giving your kids Nerf guns and saying, don't shoot the cat. What's the first thing they do? Shoot the cat. My kids anyway, I don't know. Okay, so what was really good is like creating some shared belief systems. And it's not about having them up on the wall and having them seen everywhere. It's about enacting them. And as a leader, being the example of those. So that was really important for us. So having a shared system and making sure that that's coming from all directions, not just down and we tell you our values, but the values are coming from the ground roots to everywhere. Everybody has a part into those values. So it's having good forums. We have tech talks, we have chapters, we have guilds, all those good things that a lot of people have. But having also that culture where you can speak up and communicate and work together to create that shared belief system. Second point that was really, really important was this industrialized patterns. So in online, we had 4 major patterns and everything would be built from those patterns. So you could choose anything you want as long as it's from those 4 patterns. And they were around those platform teams, iOS, Android. So they had real good module frameworks that have been built out really well. Mini apps for webs, that's our micro front ends, and Spring Boot APIs. So that was really good. And we've been industrializing them for the last couple of years, and it's made a huge benefit. Before that, we had some really good stuff, but I think we looked across our API space just in online, and we had 25 different types of the same thing. And now we have one type of the same thing. So yeah, that was a really important part of us. We've tried to take that to the next level now across the bank, and with a concept called 5 flavors. So the idea of this is that we should be able to build 80% of all our technology within these 5 patterns. And making good progress in the micro front ends and APIs have got a good start. Actually, core systems, they've been doing this for decades. They've got some really good patterns. Now, if anybody would talk about DevOps, well, they actually have been doing DevOps before the even word of DevOps was around, doing some really cool stuff. Doesn't get recognized like that, and it's not as visible ubiquitous across the organization, but that's a really good pattern. Probably just needs some better promotion and documentation and wrapped up. We haven't really started on the off-the-shelf stuff. That's our COTS and SaaS offering. It's really big for us at the moment. We need to put some investment in that. And data analytics is some really good stuff happening, but again, it's not spread and ubiquitous across the organization, and we want to pump that across the organization. And then what's really important, I think, too, is because you create these patterns, and you make it easier for things to be created. Guess what you're going to have? Lots of things. So if you make it easier to create micro front ends, you get lots of micro front ends. You make it easier to create microservices, get lots and lots and lots of microservices. So you need a bit of discipline with that as well. And so what we're embarking on as well in the kind of the third wave, and the third way is continuously simplify. And I'll talk a bit about this and what I mean by this. So the first thing is you may need to make everything visible. You can't simplify things that you can't see and you can't understand, you don't understand. And everybody needs to have the same picture and same map. So a way that we quite often do it is get a whiteboard and some Post-its and map out our understanding and work together to try and make things as visible as we possible with story maps, value streams, Wardley maps. Try to visualize that. There's no point in one person having a bigger context than everybody else. Everybody else needs to have the same understanding. And that doesn't happen just by somebody writing a Confluence page and put it into Confluence and it never be seen again. It's the exercise of doing that that drives that common understanding. Cool. So once you can kind of visualize everything, the next kind of concept, and this might be a bit abstract, so I apologize for that, but you need to adapt things from the specific to the general. And what do I mean by that? So like tech has this evolution, or good tech has this evolution, that things start with an idea, move to a custom build, then often move to a product, then to a commodity. And if anybody's done Wardley mappings, or if anybody wants to find a bit more about this, have a Google for Simon Wardley. Really amazing. It's been heavily used by the open source area of a way to adapt things and to make it more of a commodity, make it more of a utility. Now, if you're doing it right, that happens. If you're doing it wrong, you just get more things, okay? So you don't get a lot, you don't do that evolution. Now, I first saw this when I learnt TDD, and I was doing the bowling kata, and my first one was like, okay, do this bowling kata by Uncle Bob, and like build that without TDD. And so I was kind of bashed away at that and produced some really ugly code. And I looked at that ugly code and I was like, oh, there's got to be a better way. Followed the example where you basically create a really easy unit test, and then you build to that unit test, then you refactor it, And you keep on doing that process. And as the paradox is, as the tests become more specific, the code should become more general. And at the end, I had about 11 lines of code, and it was a hell of a lot more elegant than my first thing of that. The same idea is with your software as well. So I'll go into kind of examples to show this. So in Wardley mapping, this is us Wardley mapping the API pattern. So what we did is we have a user, has a needs, and then we mapped out all the things, all the dependencies, and then placed it where it is on the map, and then looked at where it needed to be. Really, really good way to build a strategy of how you can build something out. But when also you can kind of use it to push things, kind of use it to tell like, hey, if you want a lot of commodities on this things, then you can go and buy those. Like you don't need to go and build yourself feature flags. You can go and use LaunchDarkly or maybe an open source one as well to do that. We found that was a really good tool to try and move things on. We're also experimenting how to do that with simplifying our integration landscape as well. But also not just for tech too, but also for governance as well, which is quite strange. So banks love processes and controls and all those things. If there's a possible risk of something going bad, there's a process that you can follow. So what we did is we went, hey, okay, cool. Trying to get stuff to the cloud's really, really hard. Why is that hard? Okay, let's map it down, all the processes that we need. And so we got it all up, and we were doing the whiteboard stuff. And I was up on a chair at the top with wheels on it, scaring people. And I was mapping everything down. We put all the stuff down in there. And like when we mapped it out, like this went pages, we kind of found that first time doing this would take months to get a simple web app that might take you 4 weeks to build, but to try and get that to cloud. So we really looked at like, what's the process? How do we simplify these tasks? And working with some friends in security, we tried this out. So like we took specialized skills like threat modeling, and then we moved them into self-service. Okay, so instead of like having a security consultant tell you how to do threat modeling, or do threat modeling for you, it was here's providing you the ability and the training to do it yourself. And what that has done is it's freed up the security people to work on the automation and to improve the process. So you can do that and identify these things to move them from an idea, from a custom implementation that uses a specialist skill, to then make it self-service and then make it automated. And then with that pattern software, after doing this, we kind of, and it's quite not there yet, but it's almost there. We then came up with a process that builds a lot of that governance and everything into the pattern. So then building a much simplified process to enable that can move from your governance activities that could take several months to days. So this is our way of navigating chaos and try to create order in chaos. So the first way is highly recommended, working on a culture of engineering. Like the other two ways don't happen if you don't have a good culture of engineering and you don't have engineering at every table. And that's what we've found. Industrialize your patterns, invest in the patterns rather than instance. That will create lots and lots of those instances, but then work at continuously simplify. And that's me, that's my speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jade. I'm going to get you a bit closer to here, just because the captioner couldn't hear. Right, any questions? Oh. So we marked you.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I'm just wondering, how do you induct new people into your engineering culture?
Repeat the question.
Sorry, could you just...
How do you onboard new people into your engineering culture?
So,
Sorry. The question was, how do you onboard the people into engineering culture?
yeah. I think when the culture's not on the wall and lived out and breathed, it's passed on from one person to the other. So this is the shared belief system. When people have those beliefs and stuff and really kind of strongly believe in that, and it's not just one person doing it, but when everybody does that, then when somebody comes in with a different idea of things, they get naturally pulled into line. So if they step out or anything like that, they naturally pick it up and it becomes ubiquitous. I think we've found that, I've found that personally, that's a better way than here's our culture and it's dictated to you. But when you're seeing it acted, then you're encouraged to onboard.
Thank you for that. There's a person over there.
Throw in.
Nice catch.
What do you mean by industrialized patterns?
Okay, cool. So for us, that means making the patterns really, really robust and homogenized. So when you have initially, when a lot of like our services were created without investing in the patterns, and we didn't have the platform teams doing that, everybody solved some of those problems in their own way. So they'll do logging in their own way. They would do authentication in their own way. We had, like I said, 25 different flavors of, they were Spring Boot APIs. They're all Spring Boot APIs, but they're all slightly different. And that got really hard when we were trying to migrate something because we had to treat them all in a different way. So for when I mean industrializing, it was mean building all the non-functionals into those patterns. So pipelines, the security, the logging, everything that is needed from a non-functional point of view into that, and being highly opinionated with that. So there's only one way to do that. So essentially, if you know those Cynefin kind of quadrants, that's making something really constrained. And by making it really constrained, then initially I kind of didn't think that was a great idea, but then I kind of learned with those constraints came freedom, so that the teams could really focus on the business problem and not have to worry about the non-functional issues. Oh.
First of all, great call out, brilliant stuff. Everybody should look at them. How did you overcome security's natural suspicions and desires to always be involved? How did you build the confidence in your stakeholders there to say, back off, we've got this?
So I've been working really hard with a relationship with ICS, our security consultants, to build a really strong alliance. And it actually started with me bringing this guy who's slightly mad, a bit of a maniac, and just going, what the, da, 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 and giving him a big lecture. And he was like, who's this angry ginge who's talking to me? So now we actually meet up. He lives close to me. Our kids actually play basketball together. And so we catch up for coffee and for beers quite on a regular basis. But we're on the same page. We have that same shared belief system. We work really hard on that. And the idea is he doesn't want to be stuck in the detail. They don't want to be gatekeepers. He doesn't want his people to be gatekeepers. He wants them to be enablers. So we've partnered up. We do our own security reviews and everything in OC3 now, and we're piloting that. Hasn't been pushed out to all the other domains, but we want want to work really hard to get that out of there. And that's starting to free them up. Like you can, in BNZ, you could be waiting 4 months to get a security consultant, you know. So in that process that I mapped out, there's wait times for these specialised skills. To get a risk assessment and a security consultant done, it's a long time. So I'm really partnering with them and getting them to work on the process has been the big thing. So them documenting the process and training us how to do that process and then auditing that process to make sure we're doing it well, that's been so much better than us waiting for a long time to get a security consultant and then, you know, their security consultant being a real blocker for us to go live.
Yep. Thank you, Jay. Can you please round of applause for Jade Thomas?